Here in the Low Spec Gamer, it is obvious that I have a thing for small computers. I guess I love stuff that breaks away from the usual format of computing and does the best with limited resources, even if that resource is space, because darn if the mini computer premium ain't real. Now, small computers come mostly in two flavors. You have stuff like single-board computers, on which I have played a few really impressive options, and on the other side, you have mini ATX cases, where you can customize a lot, but they're a pain to put together. I might be working and failing to do one of this for a video, so if you feel the frustration in my voice, that is why. Slapped right in the middle of these two extremes are barebone kits like the ASRock Desk Mini. Kits like this usually allow you to put your own CPU, RAM and disk drive and rely on integrated GPUs. I love the Desk Mini. I have a Ryzen 3200G on it and you might have seen me use it on all sorts of videos. Now, due to space, heat and power limitations, these kits do not include the option for a dedicated GPU, except if you use something like an M.2 adapter. But I was still surprised I had not seen that many companies give it a try. And then I received this. Minis Forum is a Chinese maker of ultra-compact PCs using everything from Intel CPUs to Ryzen laptop APUs, which I really hope to be able to review someday, but this one caught my eye for a different reason. This is the Elite Mini H31G, a barebone kit that takes coffee-like Intel CPUs, with the following being the ones officially compatible with the kit. So, all the way from a not terribly priced quad-core to an 8-core that costs almost as much as the barebone kit? Yeesh. It is not a secret to anyone following PC techs that at this cost level, when you do core-to-core comparisons, AMD is constantly coming out on the top, so one does wonder what extra chipset features Intel has, or if there's anything happening in the supply chain over China that makes Intel the choice here. It is hard to put a close equivalent for an AMD CPU that released around the same time, but with the exception of the quad-core, which seems okay, these Intel variants in general seem like fairly priced non-multi-threaded alternatives to some of the old Ryzen favorites. My review unit came with an i5-9500F, a surprisingly aggressively priced CPU, which makes me think I should do a comparison video for sub $150 CPUs in the future, but still leaves the room for a future CPU upgrade. Also, it is harder to find in developing countries, and I'm not even sure why. And since this is a bare-bones kit, it does have space for two M.2 drives, 2 slots for Sodium DDR4 RAM, and a laptop-size SATA drive. So you can, as I did, add a mechanical drive for games or file storage. But the real surprise that caught my eye is that deep inside this tiny device, there's a dedicated GTX 1050 Ti. I'm sorry, what? As you probably guessed, the GPU is soldered directly into the motherboard, so it's not like there's a magical pocket inside this miniature computer that you can connect a full PCI GPU, but using a soldered dedicated GPU places this computer in a very weird position in this mini PC spectrum I mentioned before. So my immediate question is, why? For this type of computer, the primary use case is evidently clear when you realize they tend to come with VESA mounts so you can put them behind a monitor or something. These are either light production machines or thin clients that can be attached to the back of a monitor or in a mount. Now you will think that if that is the case, a good CPU with an integrated GPU will be just enough for most uses, but there's a lot of productivity tasks where the 1050 Ti comes in handy. If you have to work with videos, as I do, you might also be held hostage by freaking Adobe Premiere. Yes, I know there are amazing alternatives that do not cost as much, but when everyone you can delegate tasks to in your workflow uses the same software, you're basically forced to use it. That's how they get ya. Anyway, Adobe Premiere somewhat recently introduced hardware-accelerated rendering, which severely cuts rendering times as long as you have a compatible NVIDIA GPU, of course. This means that literally since I received this device, the first thing I did was basically use it as a mini rendering backup PC. You might have noticed that in my infinite folly, a lot of these clips I'm recording now are in 4K. And I do not have an appropriate computer to edit 4K from, so all clips require rendering lower quality proxies. And I have been uploading that work to this mini PC, so my main laptop or computer isn't unavailable for an hour while this is happening. And hey, it works! It uses its resources to the max and chews through those clips. But let's be real, I have so often recommended something like an APU mini PC as some sort of mini console that you can put it next to your PC. So now that this has a full dedicated GPU, is this mini PC the natural next step for that? So when you see it from that context, you immediately ask yourself, why a GTX 1050 Ti? At this point, that is a 2-generation-old GPU. Why not a newer mid-entry level like a GTX 1650? My educated guess is that there's some sort of supply and cost issue. The 1050 and 1050 Ti are rarer on available new gaming laptops, but they still show up all over multimedia and productivity laptops. And they are still stupefyingly popular in the Steam hardware survey. It has been about 4 years since this GPU was introduced, but its continued popularity made me very curious about how it does on a gaming device, especially on a device so tantalizingly small as this one. Now, most competitive titles are not a problem as you will imagine. Apex Legends on a mixture of medium to high settings with a dynamic resolution scaler performs as well as you will expect. And Apex Legends can be a fair deal heavier than stuff like Overwatch, let alone something like Valorant or Counter-Strike. Older games, GTA 5, whose sales show us the folly of trying to escape the past, just kills it as you will expect for a game that is starting to show its years. And I'm not interested in raising the settings, so let's move on. Doom Eternal? As I have explored in the past, this game is somehow magically impossibly optimized, so it should not be a surprise when in medium to low settings, the dynamic resolution scaler can just make it work fantastically. Darn it, Doom Eternal, I will never not be surprised. So maybe it is more interesting to try Flight Simulator on the lowest settings. If you have also been keeping up with some of the gaming discussion, you will note that this game can be a GPU and a CPU stress test, especially when flying over a large city. Now, I have noticed improved performance on recent updates, but even still, I was really surprised when I saw the frame rates I was getting when flying over Manhattan. This is the lowest settings on 1080 and a 70% resolution scale, and while hitting the GPU bottleneck, the 1050 Ti was keeping it together, and that 6-core CPU was handling the challenge way better than I expected. One thing this was useful for was looking at temperatures. One of the chief issues with any mini PC design is temperature limitations, and my suspicion is that this is one of the main deterrents for more mini PCs coming with dedicated GPUs. The Elite Mini has what looks like a pretty good cooling solution with a meaty heatsink and dual fans, which go really hard on it when in stress. You can see how the CPU is getting pretty toasty. Technically this is okay as long as it's under 100 degrees, I guess. Thankfully this is not a laptop that you put in your lap, so it's fine, it's not like it's going to burn you. I do wonder if this same cooling will keep it together with an 8-core that it's supposed to be compatible with. So let's switch to the... Alright, that is not going to happen. Moving on. My favorite CPU pusher is always the newest Assassin's Creed, and right here it's running on lowest settings and a 70% resolution scaler. To my immense surprise, I started finally seeing the CPU struggle. I'm definitely showing just how out of my element I am when confronted with anything over 4 cores, but somehow I had assumed such a high core count will translate to at least 60 FPS here, but clearly there are limiting factors I am not seeing. Maybe I really should just buy a bunch of cheap current gen Intel CPUs and make a comparison video. Click the subscribe button if you want to find out when I do that. Red Dead Redemption 2, as usual, is a great way to test everything a computer has. This is performance settings at 75% resolution scale, and right around this section over here, you can see that almost barely make it to 60 FPS, limited by a combination of CPU and GPU power. Still, not bad at all, and I know many that will not mind playing something like this. In fact, for a lot of recently released titles being creative with the use of the settings, you can get a pretty good TV gaming experience from this guy. Given the era in which we live, I could just not pass on throwing Crysis Remaster at it. This game can be aggressively single-threaded, but on 1080p and lowest settings the CPU benchmark does fine. But hey, this is the Lowspec Gamer, so I just had to go and start throwing stuff at this computer that is absolutely not technically capacitated to do. Since Crysis has a software ray tracing solution that works even when you do not have an RTX GPU, but it's really freaking heavy, I just had to try it. I did a video recently on some of the modifications you can do on how ray tracing is working on Crysis to make it function on a less capable PC, such as reducing the resolution of the objects in the ray trace reflections, and using those exact settings I got playable frame rates out of this PC. Not that I would recommend it, but it did work better than I expected. So where does this interesting experiment end up in? Considering the barebone kit is essentially a power supply, a motherboard, a case, and a GPU, the price is Actually surprisingly competitive when you take into account the dreaded mini PC tax, and with a CPU added to it, the GTX 1050 Ti is still a surprisingly viable gaming card, which makes the Steam hardware survey more logical, and does make a mini kit like this a nice alternative/improvement to an integrated GPU-only solution. That said, I really wish we had an alternative GPU standard to just the big PCIe cards, because I would much rather have something this size that can be upgraded down the line. Yes, I know Intel tries something like this, which comes to show this is an extraordinarily niche thing that will not be reaching decent prices anytime soon. Hopefully, this weirdly specific device will have some sort of measure of success, because I would love a second one, hopefully with something like a laptop GTX 1650, because I am constantly surprised by the power to performance ratio on that level. Maybe an AMD socket, I don't know. Hey, at least interesting things are happening with the mini PC space, so I can continue exploring these ideas, and people can continue filling my comment section with comments about how building a full tower PC with the same specifications will be much cheaper. Yes, it would, but if you're aware that the mini PC tax is a thing, then this is an interesting device, and it will likely earn a permanent place in my desk. We will see how it does. And since I'm going to do that, I now have to go through the grueling process of logging into all my accounts, my Dropbox, my game services, and the million things that I need for any work. Thank God I have Dashlane, this video sponsor, or I will be going insane. Dashlane is a mobile and desktop app that gives you a shortcut for everything you do online. It autofills forms and payment info, it generates, stores, and autofills secure passwords for all your accounts, which are locally encrypted for maximum security. It has apps for Mac, Windows, iPhone, and Android that auto-sync among all your devices. It alerts you when some of your passwords were in some major darknet leak. Like, yeah, it is the second thing I install on any computer I plan to use regularly, and I have too many freaking accounts, and no, I cannot run my life without Dashlane. That is not a joke or part of the sponsor read, it is literally the first and only thing I log into when I start my laptop in the morning. Not to mention that no credit card is required at sign up, not even Dashlane has access to your data, so your privacy is secure, and it will always be an ad-free product. To try Dashlane for free on your first device, head to dashlane.com/lowspecgamer. Then if you want to upgrade to premium, use my code lowspecgamer for 10% off.